Hello, I'm Nathan Martin,
And I'm Aline Vermeer.
the Divine Pollination Hive at divinepollination.com, and we're going to be interviewing David Nova, the author of the Season of the Serpent book series. And we're just going to be asking him a bunch of questions. Here you go. Those are the two books, Season of the Serpent Book 1 and Book 2. You can find those at amazon.com on both the Kindle format and paperback for both. Is that correct, David?
Yes, and soon I'm hoping it'll be on iBooks and Nook.
Oh, nice. Very
Nice.
nice. And we'll be putting links to that in the replay, so not to worry. The reason that we wanted to talk to you, David, is we really enjoyed your book. We appreciated it. We read it in just a few days. I started and got through book 1. She started book 1 after I was done with it, and I was in book 2. And as soon as I was done with book 2, she started that.
Okay.
And we both were amazed at the level of clarity that you had, and I don't even know how to say it. It was just so many fine details.
Yeah, it's the intricacy of everything. It was so deep, and
Hmm.
there were a lot of moments that I actually, being a writer myself, I was like, how the hell do you do that? How the hell do you actually get so many different angles in a way that becomes so perfect? It was really an amazing experience.
Yeah, it was a multi-layered book, and that's
Yes.
how we felt about it. There's just lots of layers, and you could read it a couple
Exactly.
times and
Exactly.
find new things about yourself, in the story. And I really identified with the character personally as well because I grew up a little bit, at least a year and a half, in the same area that the main character grew up in, and so I knew some of the landmarks and some of the lay of the land a little bit. So I felt a little bit of identifying there, as well as just my own life purpose and things like that. As well as you do a great job of explaining duality, and that's a concept that not a lot of people really understand. Um, Also, I'd like to, in this, without giving away too many details of the book, so we're going to talk about the book a little bit in this interview, but for the most part, we'll be talking about you, David, and just asking you where you came up with all this information, where you learned it all,
Yeah.
and what was your process. So if we could start with that, tell us a little bit about you.
Okay. Well, the book was a labor of love and aggravation. It involved quite a bit of research, as you can imagine.
Hmm.
All of the Cold War stuff as well as the metaphysical stuff. Um, and the synchronicity within the book, I mean, some of it is true real life synchronicity that happened to me, that was my life, and some of it came to me while I was writing the book, just sort of out of nowhere, it just materialized as I was writing the book. And I would surprise myself with things that would just appear on the page and the way things just sort of lined up. So some of it was planned and some of it wasn't planned, and some of it was just fortuitous and synchronicity and just amazing connection with the universe. It was also, it was written in a time as the Cold War in the early 80s that was very significant for me in terms of my awakening. And so that particular, what I wrote about is that part of my life that where I was sort of like connected with the universe in a way that hard to describe. But a lot of synchronicities were going on. There was a lot of awakening for me, and there's a lot going on in the world in terms of the Cold War. And I sort of brought all that back together when I wrote the book. I sort of like rediscovered a lot of what was kind of going on beneath the surface of my life back then,
Okay,
but in
so
a metaphorical way, as an allegory.
Yeah.
Um,
did writing the book help you understand yourself anymore?
oh yes, absolutely. I mean, it started as an autobiography, pretty much. I mean, I was trying to write about my college experience in the early '80s, and in a way that sort of like made sense to me, that I could kind of figure out what was going on with me and my awakening and everything. And it grew into more than that. It kind of grew into this big mythic story about the universe and everything. And so originally it was just supposed to be kind of a straight coming-of-age college story about a boy in college coming of age and spiritual awakening. And it developed particularly after I watched The Dark Side of the Rainbow, the Pink Floyd Wizard of Oz mashup. That's sort of the trigger that sort of started it into this fantasy realm, this astral plane, that kind of made it grow. It just sort of triggered something in my mind. It sort of like this was like a little seed that just grew into this big, huge story. Yeah. So,
how long did that take to develop from when you watched the Pink Floyd mashup to becoming a book? Was it years or was that months?
Oh yeah, no, years. You know, because I watched the Pink Floyd Wizard of Oz. Now, for those people who don't know, it was if you play the movie The Wizard of Oz with the soundtrack The Dark Side of the Moon from Pink Floyd, and you start the movie at the third roar of the MGM Lion, you start the album and play it through. You have all these amazing synchronicities that just sort of happen between the music and the movie, and it was something that I had heard about through friends online, and we got said, oh, we should go check this out. We should watch it, and we got together and I rented the movie at Blockbuster and we had the album and we played it and did it, and it was just amazing. And that was back in 1997, in June of '97. So
really internet.
Yeah, early internet. So yes, it's taken a long time to write this book.
Okay.
It didn't. Yeah.
It didn't just materialize out of thin air.
Part of it did, and part of it was just hard work.
Yeah.
A lot of life experiences and the hard knocks.
Yeah.
Okay. So how did you mentioned research? Were you spiritual before you wrote the book, or was it just like the spiritual path that allowed you to write the book? You mentioned the law of one as something that was influential for you.
Yeah, it's been a journey, and I think it's sort of played off each other. I had interest in spirituality, and I was reading a lot of metaphysical stuff, and in the course of writing the book and before writing the book, and so they sort of fed off each other. The book required more research, and I would do more. I was basically just thirsty for knowledge, and I would read a lot on the side, and all that knowledge and that sort of metaphysical stuff that I was learning and absorbing just sort of became part of the book.
Okay. There's some angles in the book that are highly Gnostic. Would you care to, without elaborating on the book itself, kind of talk about your own research into Gnosticism, or how that might have influenced the book?
I've read a lot. I've read some of the Gospels, the other the Nag Hammadi Gospels, and the Gnostic writings. It's interesting because I never really considered myself a Gnostic, but I always was. And I think that started in college, with my experiences in college, because I was very much seeking my own understanding of the universe. And it also, I think, because a lot of the Gnostic story begins with the story of Adam and Eve and the serpent. And in college, my spiritual awakening happened with marijuana. And I don't recommend that for everyone. It just happened to be my path.
Yeah.
And sort of I was literally kind of experiencing this sort of metaphysical Garden of Eden moment. And that was sort of my Gnostic path, is sort of like being tempted with forbidden fruit, and in the Garden of Innocence where I was in college, and kind of it was and still is illegal for the most part. It's less illegal now, but there was that stigma attached that it was forbidden, and there was a person in my life who played the role of the serpent, who tempted me into smoking marijuana. So that's where the story came from. That's where sort of the origin of my Gnostic background is. I sort of literally relived this Garden of Eden story.
Yeah. So it became personal. When did you realize that was your Garden of Eden? When did you connect the dots?
Oh, immediately. I knew as
Wow.
I was, having those first experiences in college, it was like I was very much aware of like this is what was happening, and it was just, for me at the time, it was just sort of like, oh, that's interesting. It's really bizarre and kind of cool, and it was like this weird dream-like experience that was very symbolic. But it was sort of the origin of my kind of a spiritual awakening.
Okay. Do you remember? Was there any particular moment when you were exploring this that there was just this aha, where everything, you just kind of started to understand things a little bit better, or was it gradual? Was it rapid or just slow?
Well, it was very rapid, but also gradual, if that makes sense. I mean, it happened very quickly to me in college all at once, more than probably I was ready for. And, in a very non-linear way, just this sort of like enlightenment that sort of hit me out of nowhere. And I wasn't ready for it. I was too immature. And so, I sort of had to step back and rediscover a lot of what happened to me and what I was experiencing. I sensed unity. I sort of like in those days, I was like, I would just walk around and feel like I'm connected to the universe and everything, and lay on the grass and look up at the sky and the clouds and feel God's presence just surrounding me and just holding me and everywhere. And it was this wonderful organic feeling of love. But of course, those moments are fleeting. And we want to cling to them, and I think that's where people who do get addicted to drugs, they're trying to recreate that moment. That can't be recreated with drugs. You can have that experience, a couple times, but it's a catalyst. It's not meant to be, found through drugs. But
it's not supposed to be done only through drugs. Drugs could be an inspiration in that moment, or give the inspiration to then try to find the path to really manifesting that kind of thing, I think.
So is there some diminishing returns that you noticed then with those experiences?
How so?
Well, like often with drugs, you have to do more and more in order to try to get the same feeling. So there's the diminishing return for the spiritual experience as well.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I didn't, you never experience that same euphoria, afterward. You experience it once or twice, and then it just sort of, it's less and less. But it's a catalyst for a spiritual awakening. It's not meant to be a habit or a way of life. It's just a catalyst that the universe throws at you to say, here, there's something more out in the universe that you should be looking at.
Yeah, now you've experienced it, so now you can go look for it. Otherwise, you don't know that it's out there.
Right, exactly.
You don't even know it exists, yeah.
Yeah, that makes total sense.
Yeah.
Have you been able to have any kind of other Gnostic experiences in your life apart from, obviously, I mean, you've been doing a lot of other work as well. I'm sure that drugs aren't the only thing. What other kinds of self-awareness or different experiences that you might have had that helped contribute to your awakening?
Did you meditate or?
Yes, yeah. I mean, drugs. The drugs was when I was in college and in my 20s. But I have always meditated, and it's interesting because like when I was growing up in Northern Virginia, our neighborhood, my parents studied transcendental meditation. And it was very odd at the time because, I grew up in a military family in Northern Virginia. My dad was stationed at the Pentagon. And all his friends and our neighbors were military people, Army, Navy. And so it was very odd to me that they somehow got involved in transcendental meditation in the 1970s. And they took us, the whole family, we sort of enrolled in this course of transcendental meditation. And I was like a kid, I think I didn't absorb too much of it back then. But it was certainly a foundation for me for meditation, and I've practiced meditation for most of my life.
Nice.
Okay, good. What about media? You talked about The Wizard of Oz and Pink Floyd. What about Star Wars? You had mentioned something about Star Wars as well being a moment in your life that really clicked some things.
Yeah. Well, yes. I mean, obviously, I think Star Wars is sort of like brought Gnosticism to the masses. It's sort of like it had this message of the Force, and of being surrounded by energy and consciousness. So that was sort of, I think, for me especially, I think that was an awakening moment, a trigger of oh yeah, this is really fascinating. I want to learn more about this. And for me, then the next step after Star Wars is reading the novel Dune by Frank Herbert, which sort of took those ideas and expanded them even more.
Okay.
Yeah.
With Star Wars, obviously, it opens people up to the duality of good and evil, just as the Garden of Eden has, good and evil, and the tree of knowledge of good and evil. What is your understanding of duality, and what things in your life unfolded to allow you to have such a mastery in your understanding, for the book?
Yeah, because that is one thing that I really realized when I was reading the book, is that it doesn't only give it gives a very small picture, like a personal picture for the main character, but it also gives a very big bird's eye view that you can easily copy paste into the collective here, and then just know what's going on here in the world and what is possible. So yeah, it's a very good question. I just wanted to add that.
Wow, that's a hard one. It's sort of like, my life has always been about duality. I've kind of, it's like the Garden of Eden thing. I kind of lived it as a gay man who came out of the closet in college, and who had, my relatives, my family were very Christian, conservative, born-again Christian. So I grew up in this sort of duality world between this sort of, political, religious duality world between conservatism, liberalism, religion, secular, gay, straight, and being in the closet. It was sort of, I was caught between two worlds, and that was sort of definitely the sort of source of duality. And also at the time, in the 80s, with the Soviet Union and the United States being in a Cold War, there was that other larger sense of duality going on. And sort of, so it was a sort of, at that, it's like a nexus of events, I think, in that my period of my life, where all these forces were coming together and became the basis of the novels. And the duality was very much a part of where I was and what I experienced. So thus, that's kind of what I explored.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I was thinking about some questions. Well, actually, I would like to know what your I don't know how to say it. Like, what your opinion is on life in this moment, on this planet. I know that the way that the second book ended, and of course I'm not going to say anything about that, but it was kind of like, I know that you might have some kind of a viewpoints towards the future, something that maybe you would like to have happen in the collective, or maybe something that you see happening. A trend. Yeah, maybe elaborate a little bit on that, on just your opinion on it.
Okay, well, I think that there are forces at work, that there's a lot going on, under the surface of things, that you know, in these duality forces of order and chaos, you know, butting heads. It sort of creates, in my opinion, or my belief, or my feeling, is that you've got this sort of pressure. You know, you've got this order and chaos, and there's sort of like a vice that's sort of squeezing the world. And you know, it's at that pressure point that you know, that there's rebirth, that there's a need to transform, to change. And so that all these forces, you know, we see it, you know, in the landscape of the political world, with growing surveillance, and just and a call for more freedom and liberty, is that there are these dueling forces that are coming together, and I think that's squeezing us in the middle, and we have to change to transform ourselves. To rise to the next level. I think it is sort of. I'm trying to think of an example, but we're being forced to redefine ourselves, recreate ourselves, I think.
Yeah, exactly. We're like, and I totally agree. I think we're just being pushed out of our old paradigms because the pressure is getting so high that we just have to look at ourselves. We just have to look at what we are doing and what's happening. As long as the pressure is not really high, people are just going on with their business, doing the same thing, not really looking at things. Because and that is the one thing that I also like very much about your book, and about in general people that do this, that not only take in spiritual work like reading the Bible and that kind of thing, reading Gnostic things, but also reading other spiritual concepts and looking up on them, but then also actually making something personal of it. Not only taking it in, but also involving it in your day-to-day experiences and seeing yourself in them. And I feel that that is something that we're now more and more are going to tend to do, because we're so pressured that we now have to look at ourselves also. We cannot just read it as, oh yeah, that's a nice concept, put it on the bookshelf and don't do anything with it. Now we're really going to have to start experiencing with it. We're really going to have to start living it, and that's really exciting, I think.
Yeah, I think we have to embody that change within ourselves, and take what the knowledge that we absorb and become it. You know, sort of become something more. You know, than just kind of going along with the program, so to speak. But,
yeah.
So if I were to say, you know, why are we here? What is the purpose of duality? You know, why good and evil? What's the point of eating of the tree? You know, was it a good thing or was it a bad thing?
Well, I think it was inevitable. You know, it was sort of like, it's sort of like it had to happen because that's just the way the world is, and we wouldn't be here having this conversation if there was no duality.
Yeah. Very true.
I don't think, you know, we live in a world that was created by duality. The opposing forces. You know, you got positive and negative electrons circling around. You know, everything. I think that the universe is humming between two states, and we kind of exist in that middle, that sort of that quiet, you know, constantly bouncing back and forth between, you know, two different charges and looking for that middle ground.
Yeah, exactly. Actually creating the middle ground. That's why it's so important, I think, that we do put it into our lives and start experiencing it, since we have both opposites inside of ourselves. So that is the fun thing about it. Like, human beings have both sides inside of themselves. And they and when you start actually experiencing with both sides and looking at them the way undoubtedly you looked at yourself while writing the book and everything, then you start seeing that there is a middle ground, and we can create a middle ground.
Or a neutral charge. I call it neutral.
Neutral charge, yes.
Yeah.
We're creating a ternary system. Ternary being the 0, 1, and -1, as opposed to just 0 and 1. You know, the duality system, just like our processors are all binary.
Yeah.
You know, a binary is a dualistic system, yes and no. And so all of our computers are founded on that. But in the 1980s, I believe, or the 70s, the Russians played around with ternary computing, which was the neutral charge, and there's all kinds of things that you can do with ternary relating that's much more powerful than you can do with the binary relating. But as a consciousness, nobody was ready for it, and it was scrapped.
Wow. I never heard that. I'll have to look into that. That's so fascinating.
It
Yeah.
is a
So
fascinating
we talk about how with shadow work, we're creating a neutral charge, but we have to take the 0-1, which would say be order, you know, and just in nothing, and then you have, so order would be 0 and 1, and then freedom would be the negative 1 and 0, and so you have two different dualities you can pick from: the good duality or the bad duality, and or at least the good side or the bad side. But either side, you're going to go off in a certain direction, and it's going to be imbalanced because it's 0 and 1 or 0 and negative 1. But with a ternary relating system, we start integrating the negative 1 and the 1 into yourself at the same time. And that's, you know, why we have a shadow side. And so if you're a freedom-loving person, then you need to start working on your order a little bit and integrating that shadow side of order. Or if you're very orderly, then you're going to need a little chaos in your life, and you're going to have to start integrating that into your life as well, because that's your shadow side. So the good guys have a shadow side, it's called bad, and the bad guys have a shadow side, it's called good. And learning how to balance that. And it's funny because in our relationship, we always find how I'm the bad guy. I'm freedom.
Yeah, his shadow side definitely is the good side.
Yeah, and she's my shadow side. She's the good guy who's very safe.
My shadow side is him, yeah.
She's all about safety, and I'm all about winging it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. We learn a lot from each other. So, yeah.
So we're
Very, very yin and yang, you know. But that's a marriage. I mean, that's a relationship.
Exactly.
Oh, my
yeah,
goodness.
that would make Quark sometimes too big.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's why we teach conscious arguing classes. It's how to create a ternary charge in your relationship.
Well, it's all about finding the middle ground, you know, where you can both exist, you know, as who you are, you know, complete, you know, as two individuals, you know, as equals on a middle ground.
And when we say the middle ground, we actually say that she doesn't have to compromise ever, and I don't have to compromise ever. But how does that look? Because there's carnage everywhere when you try it.
Well, so you find that what's similar, you find what you know, where you both are the same.
Yeah.
And then bring the opposites together, you know.
Yeah.
I actually have another question that just popped in. Do you plan on writing more books?
Good question. You know, I would like to. I have ideas for more books.
Okay.
Right now, I mean, I'm sort of kind of waiting for this one to just sort of take off a little bit more, and I'm hesitant because I don't know if the audience is ready for the what's next. You know, I mean, I think it's and I don't know if I'm ready to write the next one yet. I don't feel that overwhelming urgency that I felt with these two books. You know, these two were a calling. They were my obsession, and you know, my just sort of, you know, the thing I had to complete. And I don't feel that urgency right now to write the next one, or the story hasn't come to me quite, you know, as urgently as this one has. But I know it's out there. I know I have. There's a lot of ideas running around in my head for more books, and where to take the story next. But it's not going to happen right away. I think it needs a little time to gestate. So.
Okay. Yeah.
Tell us about that urgency. I mean, were you like getting woken up in the middle of the night with ideas, or early morning type things?
Oh yeah, usually in the shower.
In the shower.
Nice.
In the shower or at the gym.
The shower is still
Yeah. But yeah, I'd be on the treadmill at the gym, and that's when ideas would come to me, or in the shower,
Nice.
or falling asleep at night, and I have to get up and write them down.
Oh yeah, that's another good one. Yes. Yeah, that happens a lot. Because I think it's because you're between sleeping and waking that stuff just comes in, I guess. Because that's more. I hear that more. You get that.
Did you release both of the books together?
No, they came out a year apart.
Okay, so you finished the first one, then kept writing the second one?
Yeah, actually, I had written. It was supposed to be one book, but it got so big. The story got so big, I had to split it up.
Okay.
And I had written the ending before I written the middle, so I had to kind of go back. And I finished book one, and I had the ending of book two, and I had to kind of go back and write the beginning and middle of book two. So.
Well, that's actually good that you say that, because that's one of the things I also wanted to ask. How did you write it? Did you write it linearly? But now you already answered that question.
Yeah.
So how long did it take to finish from start to end on both your books?
Well, it's hard to answer because, like, there were periods where I didn't write a lot, and then periods where I wrote. The last couple years I wrote is when I really got the majority of it done. And of course, I was procrastinating. The universe was pushing me to write these, and I said, no, I don't want to write them. I want to go out and hang out with my friends, and I didn't feel like writing them. The universe kept knocking on my door saying, you have to write these, and I said, no, I don't. And
Oh, wow.
So
that's interesting. So,
yeah.
and what kind of knocks were that? Like, what was can you give us an example?
Oh, synchronicities, just all kinds, just a lot of synchronicity, and just a lot of feeling this sort of pressure, this sort of voice behind me saying, "Come on, when are you going to do this?" This sort of like this. It's not a voice per se. It's more of just this sort of. There's this nagging presence behind me saying, "We really want you to write these books. Why aren't you writing them?" And I said, I'll do it, but I didn't,
That's actually good that you say that also, because I think a lot of people think that when you have a creative idea or when you feel like you need to do something, that you cannot stop yourself from doing it. And I think human nature is not like that. I think we actually do tend to find excuses to not do it, even though it is really our calling and it's really what we're meant to do, and we're gonna find great joy in it. Even then, we're like, no, I'm gonna go out with friends, like you say, or I want to take a nap, or I want to do something else. So really, it's very recognizable for me.
Yeah, it's your higher self fighting with your lower self,
Yeah.
And it's your lower self, being lazy and needing a kick in the butt, to do something.
And maybe having a little bit of stage fright or something, like, ooh, I'm not going to be able to do it well, or something like that. Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of fear involved. Oh, I don't think it's, I'm going to fail, and I had a lot of fear to overcome about failing or not turning out as I envisioned it could turn out. I think I had a lot of anxiety and fear about that I wasn't up for the task. And I proved myself wrong, and I'm glad that my higher self kept me at it, because I'm very proud of it.
Yeah.
And I'm amazed that I read through passages and I amaze myself where I think, wow, that's great. Where did that come from?
So, I love your passage on the mirror.
Yeah.
Your passage on the mirrors was really great.
Yeah. Well, it was several. Yeah.
When did you start blogging? Before or after the book?
After, yeah. The blogging was the blogging I had read, I had no clue on how to publicize a book. I had no clue about the publishing industry at all. Just kind of just jumped in. My field is video work, and so I had no clue about publishing. And so I read a lot of advice, and they said, "We'll start a blog, and to publicize your book." And I started just sort of a very mainstream blog on my author website, and just writing about movies and fluff and stuff and writing, and I realized
DavidNova.com?
Yes, DavidNova.com, and I realized I don't really want to blog about fluff. If I'm going to blog, I want to blog about something meaningful and spiritual.
Yeah.
And that helps people. So that's where Deus Nexus came from.
Nice.
Yeah.
Deus Nexus. Now I know how to pronounce it correctly. I was always saying deuce.
Do you still remember your first review that you got for the book?
Let's see. Well, you know, I had some good ones and some bad ones, but mostly good ones.
Yeah.
But I had, and I probably shouldn't tell this story, but I will just to be humble. I had this wonderful review from this woman who loved my book. She got it free. You know, I had a free promotion, and she downloaded it for free. This is book 1 before book 2 came out. And she, you know, I guess she worked a night shift and she read it on a night shift and she loved it. And she contacted me, and she was very sweet. You know, said, "I love your book, but you know, I do a little editing on the side, and I think, you know, I think she said in a very nice way that your book could use some editing." Meaning that there were a lot of spelling and errors and typos and things that needed, you know, and I had done a proofread, and my partner did a proofread, but I didn't hire anyone professional to proofread, which is a big mistake. You should always hire someone to proofread your material.
Yeah, because you always overlook something.
Yeah, and so she kindly, out of the goodness of her heart, offered to edit my book for free.
Oh. Wow.
And so I sent her the manuscript, and she edited it and sent it back to me, and I republished it. And then I sent her the second book, and she edited the second book, and I paid her for the second book. But
Okay.
But yes, I learned a lot. So it was like, yes, definitely have your novel proofread before you put it out there.
Exactly, and that is something that the one that writes the book, well, I'm speaking from my experience from when I wrote a book, it is very difficult to do the editing afterwards, because you just overlook stuff. You actually, like you say, you need somebody else that knows a little bit about editing to read it for you.
You need fresh eyes, yeah.
Yeah, fresh eyes, like you say, yes.
Yeah, for her book, when we put it back into English, I read through it, made some changes, then I sent it to my dad, and he went through and he edited it again, and then we finally published it on Amazon for the English version, because she has a translation.
Yeah, I'm actually Dutch, so when I went and made an English version, that to me was an extra obstacle, of course, since I am not English speaking normally. So yeah.
Yeah, that's a challenge. Yeah.
Are there going to be translations of your book in other languages, or are there already?
I would love that if that happens. I don't, you know, I think there needs to be more of a demand for it. But I would, yeah, I think, you know, it's not, you know, when you self-publish, it's a crapshoot. You don't know if you're going to make money, and it's not about making money. You know, I didn't write these books to be a millionaire. You know, I wrote them because it was a story that I felt I had to tell. But I kind of hoped, you know, that they would just sort of supplement, you know, a little income, or that they would pay for themselves.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's a challenge. That's a challenge in self-publishing.
Yeah, and it is actually, it's a story that really deserves attention, because in this day, I think a lot of people would benefit from reading the books.
Yeah.
It's a nice story to read. It's something that really can, it's a relaxing book. It reads like a novel, but it gives you a lot of insights, and I think people are really searching for that kind of thing in this time. So
I think, unfortunately, the readers who would benefit, you know, and I tried to write a book that was an adventure story that you know, people could pick up and read and enjoy and learn something from, that wasn't, you know, threatening, that was reader friendly. But what I found is that the material, that there's too many readers who just don't want to touch the mysticism or the spirituality in the books. You know, they want more Hunger Games, they want more, you know, Twilight, and so the readership is sort of lacking right now. But I've categorized it. I think I initially miscategorized it as fantasy, and I changed it to metaphysical when Amazon created a metaphysical category for books recently. You know, I changed it to metaphysical.
Well, that might help too, of course, since
Yeah. So in that vein, did the people that were critical of the book, was it because the spiritual concepts were just a little too much for them to grasp?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, you know, people who initially picked it up thinking it was going to be Harry Potter were
Oh.
disappointed.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
I get that. Yeah, I get that. Well, it wasn't supposed to be a Harry Potter book, so it's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
And I kind of wrote it to try to be like, Harry Potter, friendly, but not. It's certainly not Harry Potter. That's for sure.
yeah, it's definitely multi-layered and very, very deep. When we read it, we were just like, yeah. It was a rush. It was a ride. It was
Yeah. For us,
so
it was
many.
really nice to read it. Yeah.
A lot of the things that we had learned in our Belgian cave here, where we're kind of like monks here. We're not really seeing. We do our monk thing, and we're Gnostic. We just go within all the time, and we're always just having conversations and channeling and talking to each other about the intricacies of the universe. And then we have this book, we're reading it, and we're like, oh, we could have just read this.
Yeah, there is definitely not as many good books out there that are talking about these concepts, and the audience is growing. So in that way, we're ahead of the curve, I guess. You're ahead of the curve with your books, which is a good thing.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah. I would love to have more readers pick it up and read it and give it a try and pass it along to their friends. Because it was designed, and it wasn't just designed by me. The universe said, this is a book that, we want to teach people.
Exactly. Yeah, it needs to be out there right now.
Yeah.
Actually, to me, I put it up there with books by like Robert Heinlein, or is it Heinlein or Heinlein?
Yeah, I think it's Heinlein. I'm not. I always get that wrong.
I put it up there with like Stranger in a Strange Land, and I also, upon your recommendation, read the Job story, the comedy. And yeah, I mean, he's always putting these things into his storylines, these concepts, and I felt like I was reading, some of his work. Not that you modeled it after him, but I mean, it's some good stuff. Yeah. So if there was any authors, you talked about Frank Herbert, who else inspired you?
Well, I love science fiction, and I love classic. I always read classic science fiction, like Herbert, Heinlein, Arthur C. Clarke, and Tolkien, Lord of the Rings. That was my bread and butter. That's what I loved, and it's kind of the book that I wanted to write too. Is in that vein, that sort of intelligent, mystical science fiction novel. And I don't think people give science fiction enough credit for being about, especially older science fiction, that was written in the 50s and 60s and 70s, that was about ideas. It wasn't about blowing up spaceships. It was about big ideas and the quest for God.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't just space battles and 20-minute fight scenes.
There was depth in it, apparently, still. Yeah.
Yeah, I went on a buying spree the other day and bought several of Robert Heinlein's books and a few others. But so how did your coming out of the closet experience, how did that affect your spiritual progression? A lot of people might not see that as a spiritual thing, but for you, or they might not realize it is a spiritual thing, but for you it was very, very spiritual. Mm-hmm. You just minutes on that?
Sure. It's difficult because there aren't, in the gay community, there aren't as many spiritual. I mean, there are spiritual people in the gay community, but it's harder to find, I think, communities and groups. And I was fortunate enough to find, when I in my early 20s, a gay meditation group that I joined, and we got together, once a couple times a month and meditated and shared spiritual ideas and books that we liked, and that was a great learning experience for me. But the idea, coming out of the closet for me is an analogy of the spiritual awakening, and that's kind of, it's when you're coming out of the closet, you're in denial about who you are. When you're in the closet, you're in denial about your true being, who you truly are, and you learn to figure that out, who you are, and what you want and what you believe. That's different from what the world says you are. The world says, "Oh, you're not that. That's wrong." And it's the same with spiritual people. You know, the world tells you you're not, that there is no afterlife, there's no God, there's no spirituality, that you're wrong. But you know, spiritual people know that they have this feeling inside that they know there's more than this physical life, and so they're in the closet, you know. And it's only when you claim that and you stop denying it, and you claim that, yes, I am more than just a physical being in this world. I am a spiritual being in this world, you know, and I come from a different place. And when you accept that, it's when you sort of come out of the closet. And it's the same with gay people. Is like you're accepting who you are that the world has told you you're not, but you know differently, and you embrace that. And so it's to me it's the same. It's one's an analogy for the other.
Yeah.
And it, you know, for me, it happened at the same time in college. You know, coming out spiritually and, you know, sexually. It happened at the same time. So that's why it was a big part of my, you know, evolution. And, you know, I had to fight against a lot of homophobia and Christian dogma that from my upbringing. And as the character in the book, I kind of went through a similar thing where I was involved with a religious group in college for a brief time, and which was a catalyst again for me to kind of come out of the closet. So I had to go through that progression, you know.
Yeah.
It's sort of, again, like we were talking about with the pressure, you know, the chaos and the order, and creating a transformation, I think. Yeah.
So you are very connected to God. You talk about God regularly. But a lot of people, if they're tuned into the media in America, they might say, but you're gay. How can you like God? God is against, at least the Christians say, or at least the media says that Christians say. And then on the other side, you have, the gay side, and it's supposed to be a duality.
Yeah.
This fight, and yet you believe in God.
You embody both.
Yes. So how is that? How is that a part?
Well, that's what the book's all about. It's that God is not just that one duality. Yeah. God is beyond duality. God is not just a conservative Christian.
Exactly.
But and I think that's the problem. That's a trap that a lot of people get into. Gay people in general and other people, is that they have this narrow-minded idea of what our source is, our God is, what the universe is, and we carry these leftover lessons we got from when we were kids in Sunday school, and we bring them with us, and
exactly.
And we end up fighting against them because they just don't make sense to us.
Yeah, very true. And I think it's not just gay people, it's sex in general, because sex and spirituality are very connected, but we are all or a lot of us have a shadow side, which is our sexual side, because we are not, like you say, with the spirituality and with the getting out of the closet and everything. It's the same for our sexual being, and homosexuality or something like that, of course, is a coming out of the closet that everybody knows. But like, for example, having a certain kind of sexual appetite, like different things, like for example, wanting a three-way, or wanting more sex than the average person, wanting to wear cleavage. I mean, there's so many things that are being pushed down and suppressed in sexuality, that should come to the light, I think. That should be expressed to be seen, at least.
Yeah, we don't necessarily say, jump into everything, but at least look at it. Try to understand it. How if it really repulses me, or it makes me cringe, why? What about 50 Shades of Grey makes me go ugh, or what makes me say yeah? Why do I really want to embrace it, or why do I want to deny it? And not just just dismiss it because you don't like it, or totally embrace it because it now gives you license to do things.
That's again the duality sides of it, of course. But there is very little understanding in that. There's either a total rejection of it because you're afraid, or there is a total embracing of it
without awareness.
And I think what you describe is an embracing with awareness, which is
Yeah, trying to understand. And really our message in the Divine Pollination Hive is always about understanding. Trying to seek understanding. And really if there's going to be a transformation on this planet, it's going to come through understanding, not through wisdom, not through compassion. And there's plenty of compassion. Everybody's doing all kinds of actions.
We love each other enough to be compassionate.
Yeah, I just don't think there's enough understanding.
Well, I think it's a difference between nice and good. You know, there are plenty of nice people out there.
Exactly.
Few people are really good, you know, and good doesn't mean being a goody-goody two-shoes. Good means doing the right thing when everyone else says no, don't do that.
Exactly.
So you know, it's stepping up and being mature and being an adult and finding the middle ground. You know.
Yeah, doing it with awareness, finding your balance.
With awareness.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, as you're going back to what you're talking, the duality battle. I think that people have when they're treating sex unconsciously, and they swing back and forth between being repulsed and being attracted, and they sort of like they go from one extreme to the other, where they're repulsed by something, but they can't help themselves, and so they jump into it, and then they regret and have remorse and guilt. You know, they're going back and forth in that duality.
Yeah, because there's no understanding. But once you understand it, then you can start making choices from a conscious place rather than unconscious. Unconscious choices, you always have guilt and those kinds of things.
Shame and punishing yourself and all that. Yeah.
Do we still have you on board? Okay. You have your video.
There was a freeze. There was a little freeze there, but it's gone.
Good. You had mentioned that there was some defining traumas in your childhood that may have been real, or at least there were some dreams where things were happening, maybe in the astral, that kind of shaped your later experiences in life, and how they might have dealt with UFO stuff a little bit. And I don't even know what kind of a question to ask on this, so you're going to have to help me out here.
Tell us more about it.
Yeah, because I don't have any experience with this, but I find it fascinating.
Very fascinating.
Well, I had a lot of really strange, vivid dreams from childhood, and it's sort of the thing, like, I can't tell you like any other dream from childhood, but I can remember these dreams vividly. Like I could tell you, maybe there's one other dream I remember from childhood, which was like I was on a dock and I jumped into water and I turned into a dolphin and I swam. That's your sort of typical dream, is very fluid and things change every 5 minutes. But these dreams were very realistic, and they were grounded. They didn't morph and change. It were very unusual dreams, and that I had. And as a kid, I just thought they're dreams. They're just dreams. It wasn't until later in my adulthood that I kind of went back and said, maybe those weren't dreams. Maybe those were real events of some kind. When I started learning more and reading more, and like Whitley Strieber's books were a big kind of awakening point for me when I read Communion back in the late 80s or 90s. And I remember, a lot of people had this experience looking at the cover of Communion and seeing that gray alien and feeling something about that. Now, my dreams I had and they were, some were positive and some were negative. And, I remember, literally being taken out of my bedroom and out of my bed into, a craft somewhere. Now, and I can't say that I don't know if these were physical experiences in the physical plane or astral experiences with my soul being taken out of my body. I can't tell you that for sure. But something happened. I do believe that there was something happened there. And, there were many very positive, loving experiences with one group. That were almost like a soul family from an extraterrestrial source. And then there were some other experiences that were not very nice at all and were kind of terrifying. And I remember vividly about one of the terrifying experiences is that my mother was aboard this ship as well, and she was on a table being examined, and I was kind of in a corner hiding and being left alone, but I was there to observe. And they were just sort of ignoring me, and I realized, I knew that I was just there to observe for some reason. But I remember waking up, and I remember having dreams where I was literally in my room, and lights would stream into the bedroom, and I would run into my parents' room to try to wake them up, and I couldn't wake them up, and I knew that they were coming, and
Wow.
kind of like that's all I remember. And then I'd wake up in the morning, and it's like, oh, it was a dream. But
a little too real, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I had the only other experience after childhood. I think the only other experience I ever had was in college. It was one experience in college, which was very vivid at the
Was it a
time.
positive or a negative experience?
It was, I don't know. It was very neutral. It was very neutral, because I was in my dorm room. It was late at night, and I had this urge to get out of bed, get dressed, and go out behind the Coliseum on campus, where there was a UFO sitting on the ground behind the Coliseum. And I remember being really excited about seeing this UFO. And but I didn't see the people. I didn't see the beings because I wasn't supposed to. I couldn't. Their faces were blank to me because I couldn't see them. I wasn't supposed to see them. But I was very excited about seeing this UFO. And then I woke up, and I remember the next day I was in class and I was drawing a picture of it, of this UFO that I had seen in my dream. Like it was like from memory.
Wow.
So that, and I was going to put that little incident in the book, but it got cut out of the book for some reason because I didn't quite figure out how to fit it in.
Yeah.
But so yeah, I've had some unusual experiences, and I've kind of come to an understanding of what some of them were about. And yeah.
Really cool.
Yeah.
And that also shaped, obviously, your books.
Yeah.
I like that dimension to it, and I won't say much more.
Yeah.
This was an extra bonus then for the people who are going to read the books. Since it was cut out of the book, now they know.
Yeah.
That was also part of it. Nice.
Awesome. So if you had a sales pitch for your book, or if you just wanted to give a brief rundown of what it's about without spoilers or anything like that, not the Amazon thing, but a little something with some flair here. How would you sell the book?
His questions are really difficult, aren't they?
Yes, this is probably the hardest one. You're asking me to be a salesman, so I'm like.
Well, you don't have to be a salesman, but just tell us in your own words why what the book is about without the spoiler.
Well, it's a book about my life. I mean, not all my life, but it has some autobiographical elements about growing up in my life and adventures taken to another level. But mostly it's a book about the world we live in, the universe we live in. It's a metaphor for awakening. It's a metaphor of transcending duality. It's an exploration of some of the forces out there that have kind of kept us in a bottle, and why and how and how we can kind of get out of the bottle and get beyond it. And it's also a very humorous book. I think I put a lot of humor into it.
Yeah.
There's a lot of satire, social satire. Observations about life and politics and the world and society, our mores and or lack of mores, and it was a fun book to write for the most part. Um, uh, and I love the characters in the book. Um, I tried to create these sort of fictional characters that embodied certain um, uh, elements or archetypes.
Yeah, archetypes
Yeah,
for sure.
archetypes, for sure, yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know what else to say.
No,
Well,
that's
jump.
brilliant. Thank you.
Yeah, really good.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, I really enjoyed the characters in the book as well, and just I don't know. You fall in love with them, and I was bummed when I was done with book 2. I was excited and bummed at the same time. I was like, yes, darn. It's not every day you get to, go into something that's at that depth spiritually, and that's a story where you can just have fun with it too.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
I think
but it's
because
also something you get to read more than once.
Pardon me.
It's also something that's good to read more than once. It's not going to be boring
yeah.
the second time through either.
There's a lot of layers to get through, and I don't think everyone picks it up the first time.
Exactly.
Because I probably just overanalyzed everything when I was writing it and putting in all kinds of things that just popped out of out of my head. But
Nice.
so what was your favorite thing about the book?
Oh wow! Oh, there were so many things. Without giving anything away, okay.
Yeah, that's difficult.
Now he's gonna ask the difficult question.
Well, I like the character development, but my favorite parts were the metaphysical aspects when he was in the other world. Like if this was over the rainbow, or and down the rabbit hole, or whatever you want to call it, in another storyline. I like where he was in the other realms, for sure.
Yeah, I also I'm trying to figure out some specific moments that I was like, but there were so many, and I think in general it was just you were never boring. Boring or bored? How do you say this? You were never bored when you were reading it, because it just goes from one to another, and you have these aha moments, and these moments of wow, how did that just get in there? Like, actually, I did say this a couple of times to Nathan, that I was like, how the hell did he do this? How the hell did he get that all in there? Because it's just so it's very difficult for me to pick one thing.
It's a smart read. That's if I were to say one thing, it's a smart read.
Yeah, I have never I have very rarely, maybe I'm forgetting a book right now, but I've very rarely or never read a book that was that layered. Yeah, and that's what I loved about it. That there was always something else to surprise me. And sometimes I would go back and read the page again, because I knew that there was some cleverness that I was just not seeing. So like I have to read it again, and then I would see all the little angles. I love the bird's eye view and the personal. That's something that I love too. Like, even though we were reading a character story, there was for me at least, I felt how it was also just a big picture. All throughout there was a big picture. That was just, you could immediately put the big picture in there too, and I like that too.
And I think it's important to tell people that it is sort of modeled on the Wizard of Oz. I mean, the Wizard of Oz was the sort of jumping off point. The Wizard of Oz and the Pink Floyd experience was critical for the development of this book, and so I sort of modeled it after the Wizard of Oz, because you have the down-to-earth, boring Kansas part, the black and white Kansas part, whereas the character is in college, and then you jump into this other astral realm, which is Oz, and so there's a very much that it's modeled after the journey of Dorothy through Kansas, which I grew up with. I watched that on television every year. It was on, It's a classic.
Yeah.
So if there was one message that, or one thing that your readers and our viewers could get from the book, what is that one thing that you hope that they would get? I know there's 1,000 things they can probably get from it, but what is the one overall message that you hope that they receive from reading this?
I think it's about the overcoming duality. You know, it's about recognizing the duality in the world and reaching across. It's about reaching across the aisle. You know, to an opposing group of people that you think are your enemy, and making peace with them. You know,
Yeah.
it's about, you know, that realizing that, you know, some of us, we call ourselves liberals and Democrats and conservatives and Republicans, and, you know, we have all these different groups. You know, it's like in the Pink Floyd song, there's when they're during the dark side of the rainbow, there's a song called Us and Them, and it plays at the point where Dorothy just walks. You know, she's just arrived in Oz, and she meets Glenda, the good witch, and then she meets the evil witch. And the song is about us and them. You know, it's about these two sides that are battling it out. You know, and it's not either side. You know, that's, you know, both sides think they're right, but they're in a war, and it's the war that's the problem. You know.
And
so
ironically, they're both getting played by the man behind the curtain.
Yeah. So it's about, you know, ending the war. It's about ultimately ending the war by realizing, you know, why both sides are fighting and
Why? Exactly.
Why is a very, very powerful thing.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Awesome, David. Well, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
And I really enjoyed this conversation. And I'm sure that our viewers also enjoyed it, and anybody who's going to watch it in the future on any current replays. Thank you for writing the books.
Oh.
Appreciate it.
We're looking forward to more.
Yeah. And we wish you well on success for the book. I'm sure that as humanity starts becoming more and more ready for it, that it will be there. It's a very foundational work that probably needed to be there, and it's a little ahead of its time, but I think it's going to gain traction when humanity is ready for it, which I feel we're just on that cusp right now for it to crash over and to people start figuring it out.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for joining us. I am Nathan Martin.
And I am Aline Nathan
of the Divine Pollination Hive. Be well.